I wanted to really take a different approach than we typically would, you know, and I didn't want to go over the same questions a million people asked you. And the first thing that I felt I needed to ask before we get into anything else is, do you think that you get the flowers you deserve in hip hop?
As much as I possibly can. I'm not going to sit back and be bitter and complain about it. I'm good. One day they're going to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? One day they're going to figure it out. Like, why ain't nobody ever mentioned this guy? Because we have the internet now.
No, definitely. And the reason why I ask is because, you know, last time we talked, obviously, you know, I was well informed of how legendary you were in the culture, but it wasn't until really going back and listening Down by Law and listening to a lot of these interviews that I really realized, like, yo, man, Shan pioneered a lot of the shit going on today, man. And like, we could start, I could list through them and we could talk on each point and go one by one, but I just want to list a few that I came up with before we even talk about any. But first off, the song Cocaine, you doing the song from a perspective of a female, you know what I mean? And how that's gone on. Like Common, I used to love her. Nas, I Gave You Power. 50 Cent, Baltimore Love Thing. Very directly with the drugs, you know what I mean? The way you were the original cat that really did the slow flow, the smooth flow on Wreckords. You know what I mean? Like Juice Crew, Cold Chillin', being the first independent label to sign major distribution with Warner Brothers. You know, The Bridge being really the first record to chop a sample up. The Bridge, once again, the first cat, you know, like you got all these cats nowadays that claim they freestyle. I don't write shit. Well, Shan is the first cat to go in the booth with a couple of bullet points and not write shit and just do a classic song. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what The Bridge was. It was just written off of little jot points that I wrote down on napkins and envelopes.
You know what I mean, man? And even about that, like, you're the first cat, to my knowledge, who really rapped about smoking weed on records in hip hop.
Yes, that too.
Like putting your burrow on. The first cat to make a whole record about his burrow. You know, like
that. I made a record about my
project,
my neighborhood. Sure. Everybody else was talking about boroughs, Bronx and Manhattan, and they was talking about the borough. I just talked about the 6 blocks of my neighborhood.
Yeah.
The first hood song.
Yeah. But you know what I mean, man? Like in that list there, and there's multiple things. There's other things I could have added to that list, but I thought those were really strong points. And it's like, it's just very eye-opening for me as a hip-hop fan to be like, wow, like Shan, like, you know, I've always given you your roses, you know, in hip-hop conversations with people about, you know, what you mean to the culture. But it wasn't until these last couple of days that I really realized how many different things that are adamant things in hip-hop nowadays that you pioneered, man. So, you know, if that's why I felt like that was a proper question to start with. And, you know, I want to give
roads lead to Shan. It may have started somewhere else, but it came through Shan some kind of way, like me recording Rakim. You know what I'm saying? And things like that. It just came. So a lot of shit came through Shan.
And I just, you know, and I just, before I even talked to you, I just thought it was very important to give you your roses and give you your flowers. You know what I mean? Because especially with, you know, what's been going on in hip hop lately, you know, cats like DMX, Shock, you know, Black Rob passing way, way, way too early. And, you know, and I think, you know, hip hop has this tendency to, you know, we kind of skip over our history, and certain people maybe who are a part of writing the history make sure their parts are glorified. But, you know, I just really wanted to make a firm point before we got into anything to just say, yo, you deserve your roses and I got to give you your roses, man.
Thank you. Because let me tell you something that I've learned with the passing of these artists that you say. Or they give you your roses by how much motherfucking records you sold and how much popularity you got. You know what I'm saying? Every person that passed away might have got, you know, a couple of days. And this one got a much more days. It's like we all great. You know what I'm saying? But hip hop don't appreciate. They don't do that. And then, nah. Just let's go ahead and move on.
What do you think about hip hop in that makes it so much like that? Because, you know, you look at other genres of music, and even you look at rock and roll, right? And even though rock and roll was stolen white people basically stole it and monopolized it and commercialized it. But if you look at some of the early famous groups like the Rolling Stones and stuff, like they gave their dues to dudes like Muddy Waters and stuff, and said like, if it wasn't for him, I would never be doing this, you know? So every other genre of music has no problem giving their roses flowers where it's due. Why do you think it is in hip hop that we don't do that?
Because if you got to go back and give props to guys like us that started this shit and see the travels we had to go through and the styles we had to make and build to make real rap music, you don't want to point to that because people are getting away with mumbling and saying bullshit and going, rap, rap. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
You don't want to take focus away from the shit you doing, and somebody might hear something and say, oh, that's how that shit is done? That's the way hip hop's supposed to sound? Y'all shit sound good, but you ain't saying nothing. All you talking about is killing, this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Way different story nowadays.
And I think you make a point too, because in a lot of genres, like even, so when I was coming up, right, like I grew up in the 90s. So when I was getting introduced to hip hop, good hip hop was still popularized. You know what I mean? Like I seen the rise of DMX. I seen the rise of Jay-Z, Eminem and stuff. And these cats who had the mainstream by the balls per se, they had skill, you know what I mean? So, and these cats had no problem paying dues to the generation before them. And because of that, I was able, you know, before the internet, to actually learn hip hop in the history and know who the architects were. And I think you make a valid point because at that point, people were still pushing the talent forward. You know what I mean? Like they're still trying to push the envelope. We're at a point now where it's almost regressed.
What? Yes, it has. To where the era that I came from, we used the music to uplift. Even if I was sniffing cocaine and all that shit that we was doing back then, when I made a record, it said, James, stop this crazy thing. It didn't encourage the kids to do what I was doing or what most people in hip hop was doing. It was more of a thing to tell them, don't do this, be that, be good, go to school, blah, blah, blah. But the powers that be have found a way, like they always do, to make the negative more popular. Who you gonna listen to? Me and you, if we say, yo, listen, make some real good lyrics. We ain't got a dime to hand them. Now you got a motherfucker over here with a 6-figure check to say, make that shit as ratchet as fucking possible. Who you think he gonna listen to? He gonna make that shit ratchet as possible. Fuck you and you. This nigga got a check.
Yeah.